How are natural abilities turned into skills? In a previous video, we talked about heritability. We talked about the heritability of creativity. And we defined heritability. We defined heritability as the influence on genes and genetics on aptitudes and on traits. In this lesson, we're going to explore Francois Gagné's differentiated model of gifts and talents. This differentiated model explains how natural abilities are developed into skills, how gifts are developed into talents. In the previous video on heritability, we also defined what an aptitude is, and we talked about how aptitudes are natural abilities, and they're natural abilities that are influenced by genetics. They're to some degree heritable or inherited. An aptitude, a natural ability, is a predisposition. And you can already see in childhood that individuals, people, children, have varying degrees or varying levels of these predispositions, these natural abilities, these aptitudes. So, aptitude levels, level referring to the amount of something that an individual has. We could talk about levels, we could talk about styles. Styles are like the preferences, the way that people like to do things, whereas levels refer to how much of an ability or a trait a person has. So, aptitude levels vary. And like I was saying, we could already see in childhood that different individuals have different degrees of aptitude. Some children tend to be very athletic. Some children are more of average athleticism. Some children are very musical. Some children are of average or even low musicality. Now, according to Gagné, we have these different levels, and the top 10% on any given particular aptitude in a specific field, in a specific discipline, we can call those people gifted. We could say that their aptitudes are actually gifts. And that is a value, that is a name, a title that's reserved only for those with very, very high aptitude, the top 10%. Also, according to Gagné's differentiated model of gifts and talents, these aptitudes can be developed, and they are developed into competencies. They are developed into systematically developed skills, and in some cases, they're even developed into talents. Let's define what a competency is. So we defined what an aptitude is. We talked about how an aptitude is a natural ability. A competency is a developed skill, right? It's a fully developed skill. Now, aptitudes are more heritable. They're more influenced and dictated by genetics. Competencies are more dictated by the context that we're in. They're more environmentally influenced. So aptitudes are more a subject of nature, whereas competencies are more a subject of context. They're more a subject of nurture. And competencies are developed via learning and practice. So we talked about how aptitude levels vary and how you could kind of observe different degrees of aptitude already in childhood. Same thing with competence. Competence has levels as well. People are, more competent on a certain skill, on a certain competency, and some are less or some are of average. So competency levels, they vary. And they vary from minimally acceptable competence to average competence to high competence. And just like the top 10% in terms of natural abilities have a specific name, we call them gifts, right? We call those people gifted. People in the top 10% in terms of their competence levels in a particular discipline, in a particular field, those people we can call talented. We can use the term talent. So you could already start to see that this model, this framework for looking at how abilities are developed into skills and competencies, they are outlined in Gagne's differentiated model of gifts and talents. And that's why he used those terms, because according to him, the top 10% of those natural abilities, those aptitudes, they're called gifts, and they can be developed into talents, right? Without that development, they might just remain gifts, right? They might not ever be developed fully into systematically developed skills, into competencies. Which begs the question, how are aptitudes developed? Now, according to Gagne, there are actually 4 forms of development. There are 4 forms of aptitude development. There are 4 ways in which aptitudes are developed into competencies. Here are those 4 forms. Aptitudes are developed via maturation, informal learning, formal non-institutional learning, and formal institutional learning. Let's explore these in a little bit more detail. Maturation. So aptitudes are developed via maturation. And maturation refers to development that is directly determined by genetics. For example, use the example of height in a previous lesson. Now, my nephew, his name is Jacob, and he's 18 years old. And when he was, 13, 14, 15, he was kind of average height for his age. But between the age of 16 to 18, he had a dramatic growth spurt. And every time we see him, it seemed like he had grown. In fact, my stepfather, every time he saw Jacob, he'd say, "Jacob, you grew." It became like a running joke that every time he saw him, Jacob had grown. Now, that did not happen by anything that Jacob was doing on purpose. He wasn't, he didn't have a chin-up bar that he was hanging from, right? He wasn't going to jungle gyms and doing all kinds of exercises and activities in order to help himself to become taller. No, that happened by maturation, right? And this same process happens in terms of the development of certain aptitudes into competencies as well. They are directly coded. These changes that occur, these developments are directly coded in our DNA, in our genetics. So maturation is one of the developmental pathways that occurs. It's one of the ways that aptitudes are developed into skills, competencies, and talents. A second path refers to learning. It's not about maturation, it's about learning. In fact, the remaining 3 developmental pathways that Gagne outlined, that he articulated, they all have to do with learning. And the first one is informal learning. What is informal learning? Informal learning refers to unstructured acquisition. So that's what the informal aspect of the learning is. It's unstructured acquisition of knowledge and know-how, right? Understandings and skills. And that structured acquisition occurs during everyday activities. They're unplanned, they're undeliberate. So you could see in this photo that I have here, this is a photo of a family picnic. And you could see that there are some children. The children are, running around. They're playing, I'm guessing. And it also, what I imagine is happening here is that the parents, right, the adults in this scene, they're having discussions. They're just chatting informally, right? It's kind of unstructured. Yes, they have a picnic aspect. Maybe they, planned a meal. But that's the degree to which the activities are structured. It's fairly informal. Now, the children here, they are actually learning. They're learning informally, and they're learning social skills. They might also be acquiring skills that are related to athletics. I see that they're running around, but their parents are modeling, and they're not doing this in a deliberate way. They're not doing it on purpose, but just by participating in these unstructured activities, right? These children are acquiring social skills. They're acquiring skills. And they have natural communication and social aptitudes. All of us have these. And we have these, again, to varying degrees. Once again, you could see already in childhood that these aptitudes start to emerge. And some children, are really good at this right off the bat. You can see that some kids are they have high interpersonal skills. They're very social. They could read body language and they can express themselves verbally. So we have maturation and we have informal learning. Now, there's two other types of learning, two other forms of aptitude development, and these are formal. They're not informal, they're formal. The first one is formal non-institutional learning, and the second one is formal institutional learning. Now, when we're talking about formal and formality, what are we actually referring to? The term formal in this context refers to structure, right? We talk about how informal learning is unstructured. It takes place through unstructured everyday activities. Now, formal learning is the opposite. Formality refers to structured activities, intentional, deliberate, and purposeful learning that occurs. And there's two types here. There's two different paths that are related to formal learning. The first one is formal non-institutional learning. Now, formal non-institutional learning is structured and planned, but it occurs outside of a learning institution, a learning organization, such as a school, a conservatory, summer camps. Those are kind of institutional learning organizations, institutions. And you could see in this photo that we have an individual, we have a person here who is practicing, right? They are playing basketball, and it looks to me like they are practicing their shooting. They're practicing taking free throw shots. Now, I talked about my nephew before. I'm going to use my nephew as an example again. Now, my nephew Jacob, he is very athletic, right? He's very athletic. That's like an aptitude that he had, and we kind of recognized it very early on, my brother and I. And he loves basketball and he loves baseball. And they have a basketball hoop in front of their house, right? They live downtown. They have a house, and it has a driveway. They put up a basketball hoop. Now, Jacob, he creates activities, basketball activities for himself. And one of the drills that he does is he sets up these small orange pylons, those, and he puts 5 of them at different places around the driveway to simulate a key, a key that's the shape on a basketball court. You can see here on this photo, those chalk lines. And this basketball player here is at the top of the key, right? So he simulates a key and he creates 5 different points. And he plays a little game. And the game is that he has to make 5 consecutive shots. He has to sink 5 consecutive successful baskets from one point on the key before he moves to another one. And then at that next one, he has to sink 5 as well. And each time he can advance until he makes his way around. Now, this is a formal, structured activity that is geared towards improving his basketball skills, his basketball aptitudes, right? His athletic aptitude in this discipline of basketball, in the domain, in the specific area, the basketball as a sport, right? Now, so it's formal, it's structured, and he's planned it, and it's for the purpose of getting better and improving, right? It's a learning activity, but it's not occurring inside a learning institution, not a formal one at least, not a kind of regular one, right? It's not happening at a college. It's not happening at a university. It's not happening at a high school or a conservatory or, some sort of a day camp. It's not happening at those. So it is formal non-institutional learning that's taking place. Formal non-institutional learning is structured, planned, and occurs outside a learning institution. And examples include autodidactic learning. Autodidactic is the fancy psychological term for self-teaching, learning on your own independently. The final developmental pathway for aptitudes is called formal institutional learning. Now you can see that this is similar to formal non-institutional learning, except it takes place in a learning institution. So formal institutional learning is structured, it's planned, and it occurs inside a school, inside a conservatory, inside a university or a college or a camp or something like that. Same thing. It's still structured, it's still planned, and something that we do in formal institutions. So for example, what's happening right now? We're all participating in formal institutional learning. This course, Enhancing Creative Performance, is designed for learning to occur. This course, Enhancing Creative Performance, is embedded within a learning institution. It's happening at Sheridan College. And we took great care to design it to meet very particular learning objectives, right? We have goals that are related to knowledge on creativity and development of creativity skills. And hopefully, by the time you complete this course, those will have been achieved. So, formal institutional learning is structured, planned, and it occurs inside a learning institution. So, let's summarize. Aptitudes are natural abilities that are developed. And they're developed into what? They're developed into competencies. And they're developed into competencies in 4 ways. They're developed via maturation, through informal learning, through formal non-institutional learning, and through formal institutional learning.